The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the downtown streets in hues of gold and amber. Taylor Swift, dressed in a casual outfit and donning a baseball cap, had just finished a quiet coffee meeting at a cozy cafe. As she stepped out into the bustling city, her thoughts were focused on her upcoming tour schedule. But as she made her way to the car, her attention was pulled to the soft, hesitant voice of a man sitting by the sidewalk. "Excuse me, miss," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Could you spare $5? Taylor turned her head and spotted him, a man in his late 40s with a weathered face and tired eyes. His coat was frayed, his boots mismatched, and beside him lay a small cardboard sign that read, "Just need a little help." God bless, the man's name was Jack, though Taylor didn't know it yet. Jack had once been a man with big dreams, a skilled construction worker who prided himself on providing for his family. But after a serious workplace injury, his life began to unravel. With no income and mounting medical bills, his wife left, taking their 2 children with her. Jack, unable to work and drowning in despair, found himself on the streets. The weight of his failures bore down on him every day, and the glimmer of hope he once had now seemed like a distant memory. Taylor paused, her heart tightening as she took in the scene. The bodyguard at her side instinctively moved forward to guide her away, but she raised her hand, stopping him. There was something about the man's voice, an undertone of defeat mixed with reluctant hope, that compelled her to stay. She knelt down to his level, her expression gentle but focused. "What's your name?" she asked softly. Jack hesitated, as if unsure whether to trust her. "It's Jack," he finally said, his voice tinged with embarrassment. I'm sorry to bother you. I just need enough to grab something to eat, that's all." Taylor's gaze softened, and she gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Jack, you don't have to apologize. Everyone needs help sometimes." She reached into her purse and pulled out a $5 bill, handing it to him without hesitation. Jack accepted the money with trembling hands. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, his voice cracking. "You don't know what this means to me." Taylor lingered for a moment, studying him. She noticed the way his hands shook, the way his eyes darted around nervously, as if expecting someone to scold him. But there was also a glimmer of something else, resilience perhaps, buried under the weight of his circumstances. As she rose to her feet, she felt a tug in her chest, a sense that simply handing over a few dollars wasn't enough. She hesitated, then spoke again. "Jack, wait here for a moment, I'll be right back." Before he could respond, she disappeared back into the cafe, leaving Jack sitting there, clutching the money in his hand and wondering if he had imagined the whole encounter. Inside, Taylor approached the barista, her mind racing. "Can I get 2 meals to go?" she asked, slipping a generous tip into the jar. Then, as she waited for the food, she pulled out her phone and made a quick call to one of her team members. "I need you to find out about any nearby shelters or services that could help someone in need," she said, her voice urgent but composed. When the meals were ready, she thanked the barista and walked back outside, the food bags in hand. Jack's eyes widened in surprise as he saw her return. She handed him the food and knelt down again, her tone calm but firm. "Here's something to eat for now, Jack. But I want to do more than this." Jack blinked in confusion. "More? You've already done more than anyone else would. Why would you?" Taylor smiled wanly. "Because no one should have to go through this alone." Jack stared at Taylor, his mind racing. He had asked for just $5, and now here she was offering not only food but something far more significant: hope. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice trembling. "I've made my choices. This is just where life landed me." Taylor shook her head, her gaze steady and compassionate. "Jack, life doesn't just land people anywhere. It throws challenges at us, sometimes more than we think we can handle. but it doesn't mean you don't deserve a second chance. Jack looked down at the bag of food in his lap, his fingers gripping the edges tightly. "I used to have a family," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "A wife, 2 kids. I worked construction, I loved it, building things, making something out of nothing. But then, one accident and it all fell apart. I couldn't work anymore, couldn't provide, my wife left, took the kids. I don't blame her, really. Who wants to stay with a man who's broken?" His voice cracked and he looked away, ashamed of the tears welling up in his eyes. Taylor listened intently, her heart breaking for him. "Jack, being injured doesn't make you broken. It makes you human," she said, gently. "And it sounds like you've been carrying this weight all on your own for too long. Let me help lighten the load, even just a little." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Jack said nothing. Then he nodded, a spark of cautious hope flickering in his tired eyes. "I don't know what you can do, but okay, I'll try. I'll trust you." Taylor smiled, a wave of relief washing over her. "That's all I need, Jack." She stood and gestured toward her car. "Come on. We're going to figure this out together." Jack hesitated. "I don't want to be a burden," he said, his voice barely audible. "You're not a burden," Taylor replied firmly. "Everyone deserves kindness. Everyone deserves a chance to start over." As they climbed into the car, Taylor's bodyguard gave her a questioning glance, but she simply nodded, her expression resolute. She quickly dialed her assistant again. "I've got Jack with me," she said. "I need you to coordinate with the local shelter and see if they can take him in tonight. And find a clinic where he can get checked out. He mentioned an old injury." Jack sat quietly in the passenger seat, clutching the food bag and staring out the window. The city lights blurred past, but all he could think about was the stranger sitting next to him, one of the most famous women in the world, who had decided, for reasons he couldn't fathom, to care about his life. As they pulled up to the shelter, Taylor turned to him. "This is just the beginning, Jack," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We're going to take this one step at a time." Jack nodded slowly, still overwhelmed but starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change. The shelter staff greeted them warmly, their expressions a mix of surprise and admiration when they realized who Taylor Swift was. But Taylor quickly waved off the attention, her focus squarely on Jack. "He needs a place to stay tonight," she explained to the manager. "And some help getting back on his feet. Can you do that?" The manager nodded. "Of course. We'll get him settled in right away." Jack hesitated as the staff guided him toward the intake area, glancing back at Taylor with uncertainty. "You're not just leaving me here, are you?" he asked, his voice wavering. Taylor stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Jack, this is the first step, not the last. I'm not leaving you behind. I'm making sure you have the support you need to move forward, and I'll be checking in on you. You're not alone in this." Her words seemed to settle him, and he nodded, though his hands still trembled as he followed the staff. When Jack began the intake process, Taylor stepped aside to make another call. "We're going to need more than temporary housing for him," she told her assistant. "Find out about any job training programs or counseling services he might qualify for. And see if there's a doctor who can evaluate his injury. I want to cover the costs." Her assistant hesitated on the other end of the line. "You're really going all out for this guy," they said, their tone a mix of admiration and surprise. Taylor smiled softly. "Because someone has to. If everyone turned a blind eye, people like Jack would have no way out. Sometimes, a little help can make all the difference." By the time she returned to the shelter lobby, Jack was sitting in a small chair, clutching a blanket they had given him. He looked up as she approached, his expression a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "They're letting me stay tonight," he said, his voice cracking slightly. and they said they'll help me figure out what to do next. Taylor smiled warmly. That's great, Jack. You're taking the first step, and that's the hardest part. But Jack's face clouded with doubt. What if I mess this up? He asked quietly. What if I can't fix everything? Taylor knelt down in front of him, meeting his gaze. Jack, no one expects you to fix everything overnight. It's okay to take things one day at a time. And if you stumble, that's okay too. What matters is that you keep trying. For the first time in years, Jack felt a glimmer of hope, not just for survival, but for something more. Thank you, he said, his voice heavy with emotion. Not just for the help, but for believing in me. Taylor stood, her own eyes glistening. You're worth believing in, Jack. Remember that. As she left the shelter that night, Taylor couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of Jack's story. She made a mental note to follow up with the shelter and her team, determined to ensure he had every opportunity to rebuild his life. Weeks passed and Jack's life began to change in ways he never thought possible. With Taylor's support, the shelter arranged for him to see a doctor who confirmed that his injury could be treated with physical therapy and some minor procedures. Taylor quietly covered the medical expenses, ensuring that Jack could begin the journey to recovery without financial stress. But the road wasn't easy. At first, Jack struggled with self-doubt, questioning whether he deserved the kindness he was receiving. I'm just another guy who messed up his life, he confided to his counselor one day. What if I can't make it better? The counselor, echoing Taylor's words, reminded him, It's not about being perfect, Jack. It's about taking one step at a time. You've already started. Don't stop now. Encouraged, Jack began attending job training programs that Taylor's team had arranged for him. His background in construction made him a natural fit, and soon he was learning new skills that could open doors to better opportunities. Slowly, but surely, he regained his confidence. Meanwhile, Taylor stayed in touch, checking on his progress through her team and occasionally sending personal messages of encouragement. Remember, one message read, even the smallest steps forward are victories. Keep going, Jack. You're doing amazing. One day, Jack called Taylor's assistant with news that left everyone speechless. He had landed a part-time job with a local construction company. It's not much, Jack said humbly, but it's a start, and I can finally stand on my own 2 feet again. But Jack wasn't content with just rebuilding his own life. Inspired by Taylor's generosity, he decided to give back. He began volunteering at the shelter, sharing his story with others who were struggling. If someone like me can turn things around, so can you, he would tell them. The ripple effect of Taylor's kindness soon became clear. Jack's transformation inspired others at the shelter to take steps toward their own recovery, creating a supportive community where hope began to thrive. One man, who had been on the verge of giving up, found the courage to seek a job after hearing Jack's story. A single mother decided to enroll in a vocational course, inspired by Jack's determination. Months later, Taylor made an unannounced visit to the shelter. She found Jack in the middle of leading a workshop on basic construction skills for shelter residents. His face lit up when he saw her, and he rushed over, his smile wide and genuine. You didn't just change my life, Jack said, his voice filled with emotion. You gave me the chance to change others' lives too. I'll never forget that. Taylor beamed with pride, her eyes glistening. Jack, this was always in you. I just helped you see it. And look at what you've done. It's incredible. That evening, as Taylor sat in her car reflecting on everything, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about helping one person. It was about the ripples that kindness creates. One small act, a $5 request, had blossomed into a wave of change that touched countless lives. As for Jack, he ended every day with a newfound purpose. His past no longer a weight but a story of resilience he could share with pride. And in quiet moments he would think back to that chance encounter with Taylor Swift, the moment his life began again. Kindness, as Taylor often said, has a way of creating miracles in the most unexpected ways.